your metabolism doesn't really slow down. What changes is how you go about life. So you can't eat the same and maintain the same weight. And so focusing on resistance training and proper nutrition does wonders for quality of life as you age. Treat is a reward or a celebration. If you're treating yourself to the same thing every day, it's not a treat. That's just your diet. We want to have a healthy diet, but we don't want to be on a diet.
Health is a decision, but it's also a verb. We've got to do health. We can't just think ourselves healthy.
Each day, you take a little step today, another step tomorrow, and 6 months, a year down the line, you're a different person.
I'm Philippa, you know me. We're here today, moving through menopause, and I hope you're excited for this episode because joining me today is Josh Wood. Josh is a Tasmanian-based TEDx speaker, and we're going to be talking all about food as medicine, food for nutrition, food to build us up and support us as we travel this journey through life and particularly in midlife. So, Josh has got lots of experience, so I'm excited to chat with him. So, he's been a competitive powerlifter and a combat sports athlete. And, you take people in the wilderness. I hope you don't lose them there in the wilderness.
Not many.
So, today we're talking about tips to combat menopause weight gain. This is something that lots of women struggle with. Welcome, Josh, to the podcast. It's wonderful to meet you all the way from Tasmania.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, we're going today to talk about menopause weight gain. It's something that happens to lots of women, and I don't know many that are happy about it. So, we've got to give them some help, some support to combat this tendency to gain weight around that time of life. So, you know, I'm really interested to unpick some of the common misconceptions about nutrition for weight loss.
Okay, so let's dig into some things here. So, if we're looking at common misconceptions around weight loss, I think the biggest one is the my metabolism has slowed down
Oh, yes.
misconception. So, I know we're just going to open the can of worms early. Here's the thing: your metabolism doesn't really slow down. It really doesn't drastically slow down over time, hardly at all. What changes is how you go about life. And so what we often see, and this is, middle-aged populations across the board, men and women and everyone in between, you basically have not a slower metabolism, but a slower life. So when we equate metabolism for muscle mass, because muscle mass is the greatest driver of metabolism. So the more muscle mass you have, the higher your resting metabolism. So the higher the amount of energy that you burn to just exist. So that tends to decrease over time. So your metabolism slows down in terms of the engine gets smaller, but when you equate for amount of muscle mass, the amount of energy burn is basically the same. So if you're a 70 kilo 20-year-old and a 70 kilo 50-year-old, and you have the same amount of muscle mass, your metabolism will run at the same rate, basically. But the big difference between a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old is how much they're doing. So what we tend to see in these populations is that as all people age, we do less physical activity. And that is really what changes the amount of energy that you're burning. Your muscle mass decreases and your total activity levels decrease, reducing your total daily energy expenditure. And so then we say, well, I eat what I used to eat. Why am I gaining weight? It's because, well, unless you're actively maintaining muscle mass, you're losing part of your engine, the biggest part of it. And unless you're staying as active as you were when you were 20, you're just not using as much energy. So you can't eat the same and maintain the same weight. And so again, when
And
we equate for mass, muscle mass, and we equate for activity levels, the actual metabolism doesn't really change in terms of how much it needs to keep everything running.
I do agree with what you said, but I know that women around perimenopause and postmenopause are up against it. And that's because of our estrogen, declining estrogen levels that actually can cause this muscle loss of muscle
Yep.
mass. Now,
Yep.
the interesting thing is that muscle actually synthesizes estradiol. So this is a really interesting conundrum that, I think
It's not easy.
for us, no, it's not easy. None of this stuff's easy. Honestly, if it was, we'd have fixed it by now.
Exactly.
A lot of these health conundrums are a bit of a chicken and egg sort of scenario, but we've got to start somewhere unpicking this stuff. And so building muscle is a great place to start to, as you say, to boost the engine, to boost the metabolism.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that should be, and this is across again all populations. The one of the greatest predictors of longevity is lean muscle mass or muscle mass in
Mm,
general as you age. But lean
mm,
mass in general actually is probably more correct because lean mass includes not just muscle but also bone density. And
oh,
so the more dense your bones are and the more muscle mass you have as you age, the greater likelihood that you will live not just a longer life, it won't just be extending your lifespan, but extending your health span, the quality of life as you age. And so focusing on, resistance training and proper nutrition to maximize muscle maintenance and development and bone mineral density does wonders for quality of life as you age and
mhm.
increasing metabolic rate.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So the thing is, we're talking about food today.
Oh yeah.
And so fueling muscle is really, one of those things that people don't understand either. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Okay. I'm a woman, it just so happens, and a woman of my sort of era, born in the late 60s, lived through all these different diet plans that we were led to believe was the way to, have that aesthetic that is
Yeah.
so appealing. And so we've lived through this almost a lifetime of dieting, which equates to, well, the loss of muscle, ultimately.
Mm.
So, how can we turn this around now that we know better? How can we
Man,
turn this around? Yeah.
you kind of hit on a really key feature is, you spend a lifetime doing one thing, or not necessarily doing one thing, but doing many
Mm,
things that are in opposition to what you really want. And it's hard to undo, but it's not impossible. And really, when it comes to like let's define a couple of things first. So if we talk about diets, generally speaking, when we hear diet, we're thinking fad diet. We're thinking a restriction based system of eating to specifically change how much mass we have, so to lose weight.
mm,
But really, when we're looking at diet in a more general term, we're talking about your consistent and daily eating patterns. So, we want to have a healthy diet, but we don't want to be on a diet, if you get what I'm saying.
okay. Yeah.
And so any of those systems of eating that is directly targeted towards like, do this to lose whatever amount of pounds or whatever, or if your diet has a name attached to it, South Beach, Atkins, whatever, then it's probably not something sustainable. And if we're talking about women that are, in their 40s, 50s, 60s, the key should be sustainability because we want to maximize health outcomes for as long as possible. So, I'm not dogmatic about diet. I don't adhere to any one particular thing. I don't have a yeah, I never want to take away people's favorite foods. I don't like to say you should eat this but not this. I'm more interested in the relationship we have with food and hitting basic nutritional needs. And so if we're looking at like how do we maximize both muscle and bone density over time, the most important thing is protein intake. And we often have a kind of inverse relationship with protein intake and age. For whatever reason, almost every national diet, what do we call it? Dietary guidelines, especially here in Australia, they're like, as you age, you don't need to eat as much protein. Your
Mm,
serving size goes down after 50. So it's, 3 serves of, is it three or is it 2 serves? It's 2, 3 serves for of the protein group, which I have some gripes with for men and women 19 to 50. And then after 50, that goes down by a serve. But as we age, our digestive system becomes less efficient. We get
mm,
less from our food. So if we want more
Mm.
nutrients because we need more, because we're going through what's called sarcopenia, so age-related muscle loss, if we want more nutrients to combat that and support an active lifestyle, we can't eat the same amount. We actually have to get more of those nutrients, but we're trying to
Mm.
get them from a less efficient system. So our protein
Mm.
intake should go up a little bit. And that tends to be sort of counterintuitive because as we age, we also tend not to want to eat as much. Our hunger goes down. And part of that is usually a decrease in activity as well as other aging processes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. I didn't realize the nutritional guidelines were actually sending us down this rabbit hole because
Yeah.
that's the last place I want to go. And you're absolutely right. The digestive system is just not extracting as much of the building blocks that we need. So, and the other great thing about protein is that it's so filling.
Like,
It keeps us fuller for longer. So if we're thinking about making good nutritional choices, then feeling full after you've eaten is really quite a good thing, isn't it?
yeah, it definitely makes it easier not to overconsume. Like if you're feeling full as in satiated, feeling full as
That's
in satisfied as opposed to
yes.
bloated. You eat a big pile of lasagna and you tend to feel pretty heavy and bloated and you can't fit any more in, so you stop. But if you're having steak and potatoes, you tend to be like, all right, that was good. I'm full, but I'm not bloated. And so there's a difference to being, and sometimes it
Yeah,
takes a
yeah.
little training yourself and being very mindful with your eating to realize like, do you stop eating because there's no more space, or do you stop eating because you've taken in enough nutrients?
Oh, that's an interesting yeah, that's very interesting. I'm gonna think about that one. 'Cause, yeah, my next question is it as simple as calories in, calories out?
Nothing in the human body is simple. If we wanted to make things simple, if we really wanted to say, okay, how do we know how to create weight loss or weight gain? Calories in, calories out. So CICO is the basic mechanism of mass changes in the body, physique changes. You have to consume less calories, energy. So calories are just a unit of energy measurement,
Okay.
potential energy in food. You have to consume less than you need. So you have to consume less than maintenance to cause your body to consume its fuel stores, which is body fat. If you're not giving your body that reduced energy intake, it has no reason to dig into fuel stores. And fuel stores are just stored body fat. If you consume at maintenance, so the exact number of calories you need to maintain weight, you won't gain and you won't lose. You consume more, you gain or store
Mm,
weight. And if you're not particularly active, not doing any resistance training, not consuming enough protein, the storage is primarily fat. And your body does that in case of famine. Like we're really, really good at storing fuel for potential future use. We can
mm,
store it almost infinitely. But in the modern world, that's not particularly useful because we're not hunting a mammoth, eating it all, waiting to find the next mammoth. There's a mammoth on every street corner and it's covered in salt and oil. So we got a very primitive system that's very effective, but
mm,
the modern world has negated the need for all this stored fuel, but we still store it.
mm,
So calories in,
yeah.
calories out is the mechanism of weight change, but it's not the full picture because if we could somehow actually equate like absolutely how many calories you're taking in and how much your body consumes, that'd be perfect. We can't though. Our nutrition labels are usually somewhere between 10 and 20% off. Like a one sweet potato of 100 grams sweet potato and another 100 grams sweet potato might have drastically different amounts of fructose in them, or they might be a little bit more starchy, or one might be more dense, one less dense. When we look at how people actually measure stuff, what is a medium tomato? I don't know. How big is a medium tomato? Nobody knows. People then also misguess their portion sizes. So, like, I had 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, but it was more like a quarter cup because that tablespoon was heaping. And so we have a lot of issues with the input side of stuff due to limitations in how we can measure these things, and then, user error as well. But from a real foundational basic system, we might not be able to calculate exactly how many calories you take in and exactly how many you burn, but you know that if you reduce the number you take in and continue to burn the same amount, you will lose weight. But getting those numbers is tricky.
And the other thing is what sort of weight are we losing? So the thing is,
Yes.
we really want to gain muscle, and yet we want to maybe change the body composition. And this is something that, is difficult to get your head around, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's a super important point. So, one of my day jobs is I teach the personal training courses, and this today is Monday here, so it's the first day of this week's lectures, and this whole week is all about body composition. And so I'm
Mm.
teaching all the new PTs about today's topic was recomposition. So specifically, how do we maintain weight while changing the proportion of fat mass to lean mass in our body? And like you said, calories alone won't dictate that. They'll tell you whether you lose weight or you gain weight or maintain. But the composition is not necessarily dictated by calories, it's dictated by what we call macronutrients. So
Mm.
the components of food that actually give us the energy. And primarily it's protein intake. And this is something I talk a lot about when I do not just the lectures in the classroom, but some of my public speaking events is talking about the importance of protein because it often gets under considered. And like when we talk about like classic diets and fad diets and things like that, like you said, they're all about achieving a particular aesthetic, which tends to be very low muscle, tends to be very low protein intake, which is not healthy in the long run, especially for, Caucasian and Asian menopausal women. Osteoporosis is a particularly big issue, and nutrient intake is really, really important to help prevent that. And if you do end up with osteoporosis, having muscle mass to support your skeleton is super important. So that style of yo-yo dieting and fad diets can be really detrimental to women in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, having said all of that, there are women who still would like to lose weight.
Yeah.
So, around this time of menopause, they experienced it again that they were not happy with, something that had never happened to them before. You hear this a lot, that women who were previously slim and, fit and healthy, somehow this weight came upon them, and particularly around the middle. Now, what we know about fat is it does synthesize another kind of estrogen hormone. So that the thinking is that it's our body's way of trying to boost hormone, the estrogen levels, by hanging on to these fat stores. So for those women who find themselves having gained 10, 20 pounds, without really meaning to and without even trying, what sort of sustainable changes can those women make to build this pattern of eating that will be sustainable in the longer term?
Yeah. So one thing I want to help people avoid is a paralysis by analysis. So often we,
Oh,
we kind of get into this issue of there's all these things I have to think about, and so I'm gonna do nothing. And that's also not a solution. So doing something is always better, and my thing is always do the smallest thing first. Do something little. And so there's two ways to look at this. And when anybody listening to this, don't try and do both of these right away. Pick one thing. Pick one thing, stick with it. I would say ideally 4 to 6 weeks. Now, there's two options here.
mm,
There's weight loss focus. How do I lose weight as quickly as I want to, but in a still fairly sustainable manner? Or how do I change my relationship with food? And thus also, how do I change my relationship with my body?
mm,
And those are
ooh,
those are different paths. So,
yeah.
path one, my goal is to lose weight specifically. As a coach, I would say you want to do that in a way that maintains or gains muscle mass because that is going to be best for your health and your ability to interact with the world. So, if that is your goal, I would say you need to figure out what your maintenance calories are. You need to reduce those. while hitting minimum levels of protein. And there's a pretty simple way of doing this. If you use any of the food tracking apps, like I use MyFitnessPal a lot because it's free, but take one of those, record everything you eat and drink. So your wines, your lemonades, all that, that counts. That counts probably more than food because it's just nothing good for you. But record everything that you eat and you drink for 7 days. Weigh yourself at the beginning of the week, weigh yourself at the end. If you weigh approximately the same, you now know what your maintenance calories are. Take those calories, shave off 250 a day, do that for the next week, weigh yourself again. If you haven't lost weight, you know that A, you didn't record well, or you're not in maintenance and you're still either just in maintenance or you've changed your exercise habits, whatever.
Mm.
So if you don't see a change, drop another 250. So in theory,
Mm.
500 calories a day will cause you to be in a 3,500 calorie deficit.
3,500
W-
equals 1 pound.
1 pound of body
Yeah,
mass up fat
yeah, yeah.
in theory. Does it work
In
out that way?
theory.
No. But if you are honest with your recording and accurate and consistent, after a while, you will see consistent weight loss because you now know what you need to maintain weight. And now all you're doing is taking some off. When you do that, it's very important that you maintain protein intake. And so my recommendation is always somewhere between 1.4 and 1.8 grams of protein per kilo of mass. Because if you're already weighing and measuring and counting everything, just do it with your protein too. So that's option one. It's clinical, it's tedious, but it's 100% effective. Option two, look at your relationship with food. And this is what we were talking about this before the show, but this is what I was attempting to address with my TEDx talk. You know,
Yeah.
my 6 habits to eat like an adult, learning to recognize hunger signals, decide if you're actually hungry, learning how to manage emotional eating, learning how to recognize treats uh, and whether or not you deserve one. This is the thing. A treat is a reward or a celebration. You know, it's an earned thing. I made that sale. I'm gonna get myself a nice bottle of wine. But if you're treating yourself to the same thing every day or the same thing every week, it's not a treat. That's just your diet. Treats are not habitual. So learning to recognize the patterns in how you eat, learning to understand that making a good enough choice is fine. Doing little changes each time you prepare food or when you go out to eat and not worrying about doing everything at once. You know, again, not getting letting perfection get in the way of the good, but looking at the habits around eating and the emotions around eating. That path I think is more enjoyable, but if you like structure, it's a little bit loosey goosey, and some people may not do well with that. Some people like the
Mm.
structure. Some people want to delve more into the relationship. I would highly recommend like having a look at the eat like an adult talk and sort of delving into some of the habit formation. And I can go over some of those. I don't know how much depth you want to go into there, but whatever system you choose, just choose one. Do one thing, one step, because it can get very easily overwhelming and counterproductive to try and do everything at once.
Mm. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? Yeah, do everything, do nothing. And that's the same with exercise as well, isn't it?
Yes,
The same
absolutely.
principles. Mm. So I think, the relationship we have with food is so complex and complicated. But, really getting honest and getting to know yourself in midlife it can be a real gift because, we've been so busy up until now doing things for everybody else, perhaps as women. And so, that idea that you delve into understanding, you delve into this idea of noticing because, a bit like you said with keeping your food diary. Oh gosh, it's hard not to cheat yourself. I had to
Yeah.
do one once for a nutritionist, and I found myself sort of editing the food. I
Yep.
I mean, what's that about?
Well, this is, this is an accountability issue, and this is something that I speak to a lot is that, we need accountability structures. We need social interaction to maintain habits because on our own, we will always cheat ourselves in the long run. We might be able to keep it
Yeah,
up for a little bit, but unless we have an external accountability structure, whether it's a training buddy or a coach that you've hired or people online or like an app or something that gives you little rewards when you do well, like if you don't have something outside yourself, you will end up cheating yourself at some point.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
human nature.
Uh, it is, and we've all got it, all of us, So I've been thinking about this. Health is a decision, and I'm in this for health. This is why I'm here. For women to live long, healthy lives for as long as possible. And so what we talked about, preserving muscle, preserving bone, that is key to
So
that
important.
discussion. So important. So, we want to look good, feel good, but we need to be able to move and function because, the rest of it, once you can't move and you can't function,
Mm,
the other stuff's immaterial, really, to be honest. So I'm in it for health, but, health is a decision. And,
I love that.
oh, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been thinking that all week. Yeah. Health is a decision, but it's also a verb. It's a doing word. We've got to do health. We can't just think ourselves healthy. We
Yeah.
we've got to take all these actions that, we've been talking about today, and to be honest with ourselves, and to forgive ourselves, because being hard on yourself isn't going to work either. We've got to travel this journey with empathy for ourselves and the people that accompany us on this journey, our family members, our friends, whatever. And share this with them because this stuff is so life enhancing when we do it. And it works if you do it,
Yeah.
doesn't it,
Exactly.
Josh?
It does. You just got to do it. And that's honestly
Yeah.
often the hardest part is like taking that first step. And I always recommend you just take the smallest step that you have to. And you just take a
Mm,
little bit more each day. You take a little step today, another step tomorrow. And, 6 months, a year down the line, you're a different person. But too often
mm.
people keep putting off that first step. Too often it's like, I'll figure it out on my own instead of actually getting someone to help you with it. I'll get there when I'm ready. And then all of a sudden, you're 50, 60, 70 years old and you look back and you go, I should have did this a long time ago.
Yeah.
But
And it's
often
a
it's
lot
like,
harder
it's
then.
overwhelming to start.
It is, but we've got to take that first step. I did listen to your TEDx talk, and
Thank you.
and one of the things you're welcome. One of the things you said was, and I like this actually because getting back to mindfulness around food, you said if you're reaching for something that's an unhealthy snack or something like this, ask yourself. You said, ask yourself, would you eat an apple? You're laughing because you
The
remember.
Apple test. Yep.
Yeah, the apple test. I like that actually. That's a really simple tip, isn't it?
I get messages about that one all the time because people are like, I just
Oh
carry
dear.
apples around now. And I'm like, well, good. Apples are great. And you don't have to like apples. You can do pears, bananas, whatever. But yeah, the idea is like if you're always digging around in your desk drawer at 10 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon or in your pantry, you're looking for that little bit of something, stop once you recognize the habit and ask yourself if, Coach Josh was to show up in your living room with a fresh ripe apple, breaking and entering aside, would you eat the apple? And it's like if you're hungry, you would. So then just eat an apple. But if you're sitting there going, "Nah, I really want that Tim Tam, I want a little bit of my Cadberries or whatever it is," you're not hungry. You're craving something. You're dealing with something, and it's either maybe you're thirsty or your diet's poor and you're lacking nutrients or you're stressed or you're tired. Like that increase in cortisol will make
Mhm,
you crave sweet things.
mhm.
And as soon as you start recognizing that and that realizing it's not really hunger, no one is starving at 8 o'clock at night if you've had dinner at 6. No one is starving at 3 in the afternoon if you've had lunch, a proper lunch, and breakfast before that. But we want something. But why do we want it? If it's actual hunger, eat real food. If it's just because you need something crunchy, sweet, textural, apples work great for that. But if you're like, no, I really just need my can of Coke and a Snickers bar, something else is going on.
I really like that tip actually. So specific nutrients we've kind of covered with the protein, but can you suggest any other specific nutrients? I think, you kind of alluded to it there in as much as what our body is craving is real food.
Yeah.
And and if we're feeding it, off the shelf, if it rustles in a packet, there's a clue there
Yeah.
that, this didn't grow in a field or on a tree, maybe once upon a time, but it's so far removed from the stuff that our body recognizes. The body is on the lookout for actual food with actual minerals and fiber. So if we're not feeding the body that kind of fuel, then it's going to keep looking. Do you agree with that? Have I said anything useful?
Yeah. No, I mean that's exactly right. And there's a couple of things here. So, part of my undergrad, I studied Chinese medicine. So that was part of my undergrad. A health science major in Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, one of the things, the organs are arranged differently. Everything's very metaphorical, but the spleen is considered the main digestive organ. And the thing that nourishes your digestive capacity is sweet things. So when we're craving sweet things, it's how we nourish, it's how we rejuvenate, regenerate. Our digestive capacity is what helps us
Oh.
thrive. So we crave sweet things when our spleen or our digestive fire is, and we need that to help us deal with things like stress and fatigue. But sweet things traditionally, like historically for humans, were not Snickers bars. I love Snickers bars, they're great, but they're not part of our ancestral diet. And so when we say sweet things from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint or from a human history standpoint, sweet things would be like roasted root vegetables. It would be carrots, parsnips, potato, sweet potato, pumpkin, zucchini, or fruit, and in moderate quantities, especially if you're like us, pale skinned people. There's not a lot of like year round fruit in the northern climates. It's
Mhm.
basically sparse berries seasonally, and then things from the rose family like apples. Like it's just not really part of our history. So what would we eat if we were hunter gatherers? It would be, if I wanted something sweet, I'd have to fight a bunch of bees, or I'd have to dig something out of the ground and cook it. And so
Yeah.
satisfying that sweet craving was traditionally a very difficult thing to do, and it was done in a very different way. So when we eat that way, just like this is sort of the segue into protein, when we eat whole foods to manage those things we crave, we're not just getting the flavor. We're not just getting a sugar hit to deal with the sweetness, which then we get this energy rush and then we feel like garbage an hour later. We're getting a host of nutrients. If we're hitting our protein through whole food sources, whether it's animal sources like meats and eggs and dairy, which have a ton of health benefits and a ton of nutrients that we need, or we're getting from plant sources from like our pulses and grains and legumes, which are very mineral dense, a lot of B vitamins as well for the grains, and then a lot of fiber as well. Like we're getting all these other things when we're satisfying our need for protein or sweet things, but when we focus on whole foods, it's a whole picture situation. So we're
Mm.
not just like, I want something sweet, eat the sweet thing. Does this craving go away? Not really. But you fill yourself with fruits or root vegetables or sweet plant matter. It has a very different effect and a greater health benefit, especially in the long run.
Mm. So, yeah, that's great. That comes back to the apple, really, doesn't it? What we said about the apple. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been really very informative and useful. I think that the idea that we just do one thing differently, make it manageable. And if you do nothing else, just eat whole foods. And you're really well on the road to nourishing the body. Well, where can we find you, Josh, if we wanted to?
Well, if you're down in Hobart, Tasmania, just give me a call. I'll show you around. But otherwise, I'm on Instagram, Coach Josh Wood, and on every platform as Coach Josh Wood. Or you can find me on my website, strongforlife.online. My business is Strong for Life Online Coaching. But if you Google Coach Josh Wood, Tasmania, I'll show up. But if you want to catch the TEDx talk, it's on my website again, as well as the Eat Like an Adult guide. So before I did the talk, I actually made like an infographic for my sister and her family. And so that's available for download there. It's something you can print out, put on your refrigerator.
Oh, well, thanks, because these short guides that we can put somewhere that we can be reminded on a regular basis, that's really handy to have. So thank you for doing that. I'll put all the links in the show notes so that people can find you. And so if anybody's got any questions, do drop them our way. We're here to support you, to get you on that path to a long, healthy, fulfilled life, and anything we can do to help. We're here for you. So thank you so much for your time today, Josh. It's been really wonderful to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here.